affected me, and how through my work, and maybe I'm able to change a few other people's lives and give them a little hope that, dreams come true.
Yeah, I mean, the whole Paul is dead thing, and that was back when I was, in junior high. So you're just like a couple years older than me, so we would have been about the same age.
Yep.
I know you've written about that since then. And where all that was going on in the messages and on the Walrus and all those things, there's a very mystical energy, obviously, to all the Beatles. And I just saw Ringo the other day. I mean, photos of him. He looks amazing, doesn't he? I mean, truly. Let's give the boy some credit. Yeah. But when you look at the spiritual kind of energy, probably George, to me, kind of jumps out of that group the most. But when you look at that spiritual energy, and I know you know all the ins and outs of them in ways that the rest of us do, with them, though, Gary, is there anything that jumps out about that spirituality and genius of the Beatles that moved you in a different way than maybe some of the other people you looked at?
Well, when you talk about spirituality, and you mentioned George Harrison, that's exactly where it begins. And if you remember, probably around 1966 or the Summer of Love, maybe a few months before, everybody was searching for answers. And it led to mysticism. It led to exploring new avenues. Because it seems like the generation that we grew up in, that we weren't content with a lot of the answers we were getting. When our parents came back who fought World War II, I mean, they were considered the greatest generation. But when they came back, they really didn't care to sit on the back of a bus. Our generation did. And we sort of had this search for justice, a search for completeness. And in spirituality, if you went to London and you were hanging around in London, you would see Graham Bond walk around with his magician outfit on with the stars like Jimmy Page wore when he did the show in Madison Square Garden. But there was a search for that, and you could get it in their music. And, when you're talking about spirituality, the very last line of Abbey Road, and in the end, the love you take is equal to the love you make. Isn't that the answer?
Yeah, to me, the greatest album of all time is a White Album. I mean, I could listen. Okay. I remember when I was given that album, back when there were albums, right, and there was two of them, and you just take them out and just play them over and over. But there was something about that, because I saw them on Ed Sullivan when I was like 9, the very first time. And I remember all that, and remember watching the Beatle cartoons on Saturdays, and just how huge they were in 65, 66, 67. And then, the Plastic Ono Band, and when they started to kind of split off a little bit. But when I listen to that specific album, there's a song in there, Sexy Sadie. Now, Sexy Sadie has its own kind of story related to what you were talking about. You want to kind of jump into that a little bit?
Well, you're talking about the Maharishi, when they went to India, and they were sort of victimized because all of this was going to be love and peace, and he was going to show them through transcendentalism the way to completeness. And when they got there, they found out that he was more interested in Mia Farrow's sister, and that all this was, he made a fool of everyone. And that's what he sings, or it's what Lennon sings in Sexy Sadie, that you made a fool of everyone. And it sort of came crashing down. Now, the only person who really lasted in the whole belief was George Harrison. But, the others sort of tried it for a while, and they were looking at how everything was a put-on. And it didn't give them the answers they wanted. So that's the song you're talking about. But basically, when you're talking about the White Album, what's unique about that is the Beatles destroyed themselves. When Revolver came out, which is my favorite Beatle album, but when Revolver came out, it opened the gates to the psychedelic period. And then you had Sgt. Pepper's. And then the songs left over from Sgt. Pepper's were Magical Mystery Tour. The incredible production that went into those albums, the songs, no one else had ever touched it. The Beatles couldn't go any further. So what they did is they went back to the White Album where they played like they normally did. Less orchestration, none of this. And that's what makes the White Album unique. And I bet I have it on vinyl. I bet I have it on 8-track. I bet I have it on cassette. And I bet I've got probably 3 versions on CDs, on remasters of it. So, yeah, it's a great album, and I agree with you.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that's fascinating about your work, and just me hanging around with you and knowing you, and picking your brain, because it's fun to pick your brain. I have to, lots of times people try to pick mine because they're trying to get my opinion on things. I understand that. But when I get to pick yours, it's kind of like a 3D interactive Wikipedia with a laugh track. I mean, it's kind of the way I look at you. Just so now you know. Now you understand why I love you. But the thing that's fascinating is that music, there's a lot of funky, mystical, strange things in the history of music. We can go Robert Johnson, we can go Jelly Roll Morton, we can go 50 million different people.
Sure.
But I want to kind of shift gears a little bit, and I want to go to kind of the metaphysical aspects of not only the inception points with, from Blues in the Delta on up, but just kind of the crazy, mystical, otherworldly kinds of stories maybe associated with Jim Morrison or Jimi Hendrix or any of a number of people. Now, I know that you've been asked these questions 10 million times and probably sick of them, but I'm going to do it again. And it's because that's my charm, right? In those stories, though, Gary, I mean, there's some strange things going on with some of these musicians and the legacy associated with them. Are there, in that kind of repository of stuff in your head, is there anything that, again, I'm kind of letting you, pick out the highlights of what you like the best. Is there anything in there that you think is, even in a world of strangeness, like super strange, that jumps out even to you?
Well, I'll tell you what's strange. And when I wrote my second book, Hellhounds on Their Trail, I was doing some research on, Brian Jones, Jimi Hendrix, Janis Joplin, and Jim Morrison. And when I was doing it, I noticed they all died at 27. And I thought, oh, my God. So what I did is I guess I came up with what's called the curse of 27. And every time a rock star dies now, I say, oh, my God, don't let him be 27. Don't let him be 27. And I was going to Florida when Amy Winehouse died. And I bet I had 25 phone calls on my cell phone on the way down wanting to do radio interviews on what was the curse of 27. So I think that's odd. I think that you've had over 42 major rock stars die at that age. And as far as the explanation goes, people say, well, they live this lifestyle where they have to take risks, where they're on planes. And that's true, but I mean, it's not all plane crashes. It's not all drug overdoses. I mean, there's just strange happening there. And I know that I read an interview with BMI with John Mayer. And they asked Mayer, they said, what do you think, to this point, was your greatest accomplishment? And he said, well, I made it past 27. So I guess it's in the back of your mind. So if you're a rock star and you hit 27, you need to stay out of small planes and you need to watch your behavior. You need to sort of lock yourself in your house till your 28th birthday. Because if there is something strange out there, if Robert Johnson, who died at 27, opened something up at that crossroads, Highway 61, Highway 39, if there was something unworldly open there, if it was Legba, the voodoo guardian of the crossroads, whatever it is, and if Keith Richards, Jimmy Page, Eric Clapton are right, that it was Robert Johnson's unique styling that became the very beginning of rock and roll, then at its beginning, then there's a price that has to be paid. According to the legend, Robert Johnson paid it, and so have a lot of other rock stars of that same age. So I think that sort of gets to me because, I mean, I know what coincidence is, but when I'm on with George Norrie and we're talking, I can tell you that the word coincidence just means an explanation waiting to happen. So what we're doing is waiting for it to happen, Andy.
Yeah, I mean, I remember with Amy, and, you know, I had a particular interest in Amy. And I remember the day that I heard about Kurt Cobain like it was yesterday. Yeah. But with Amy, yeah. I did two radio shows about Amy Winehouse that week. You know, for similar reasons that you might have done them, right? And and there was an energy to Amy that was very unique, I thought. And you know, what I always have a problem with, again, like someone like Amy Winehouse, who is off the hook creative. I mean, otherworldly creative. Beautiful, talented, an amazing writer, an amazing singer, amazing in every way. And yet people hound the hell out of her. And, you know, and what fascinates me is that we take these incredible artists and we build them up, and then we try to poke holes in them. And a lot of them, sensitive souls like Amy Winehouse and Kurt Cobain and any, you know, even Jimi Hendrix, you know, go through these things. It astounds me what we do to these artists, you know, but there was a very kind of fragile kind of vibe to Amy that you could see, even when she was this kind of street smart young thing and just so incredible. Oh my God, she's so incredible, even now, just thinking about her. But, you know, I did a thing many years ago where I listed the people that I felt had the most past life energy, the most karmically gifted. I don't know if I ever told you this story. I don't know if I have. I did an article on what the people that I thought were the most karmically gifted. And you know who I put as my number one singer, female singer, the one that to me had the most past life energy as a singer?
Who's that?
Christina Aguilera. And when I looked at Christina Aguilera, you know, I would always see her as an opera singer. I would see her like in like Mozart's era or whatever as an opera singer. When I looked at her, the very first time I saw her, she lit up to me. The same kind of thing with Amy Winehouse. She was on my list. Diana Ross is on that list. Jill Scott. And Lauryn Hill also. You know, she's kind of dropped off the radar a bit. There's certain people that just jump out to me. Yesterday, you know, we were just playing around. We were Googling ourselves. Allie and I were, like, Googling ourselves because it's the same joke. And I found someone who had heard me on the radio talking about Buddy Holly. May have been with you or it could have been any number of places. And Bryan Adams. And she said, and she actually wrote, she wrote to Bryan Adams that, do you know that you're the reincarnation of Buddy Holly? So I found that yesterday. I thought that was fascinating. But there's a power, and that whole thing with the 27, you know, that's a 9, and a 9's a creative kind of number, and you got 2, which is a duality, and 7 is a mystical number. You throw them all together. How many people are there on that list? I know Jimi Hendrix, Jim Morrison, Janis Joplin, Kurt, Amy Winehouse, Robert Johnson. I didn't know that, but I mean, he would start it. Who else would people just know about that may have had unusual circumstances that died when he or she was 27?
Yeah, well, Pete Ham from Badfinger, if you remember Badfinger, he was 27. Pigpen from the Grateful Dead, Wandale from Canned Heat. All they died at 27. Gary Thing from Uriah Heep, the bass player, died at 27. You can go down the list. What I did is I basically put major artists. I didn't worry about somebody else coming in. I mean, some bands have a hot seat, like you don't want to play keyboards for the Grateful Dead because they seem to have a very quick life expectancy. It's over with. And but there are a number. Kurt Cobain and then Amy